Kawhi Leonard did what seemed like the impossible in 2019, taking down the Golden State Warriors. Now, KD was hurt, so a healthy KD, it might have been a different story, but this Raptors team was still very good, and it leaves us wondering how many rings could this team have won if Kawhi would have stayed. Well, that question is getting answered today because in the 2019 offseason, Kawhi just signed a 5-year supermax with the Toronto Raptors. A lot of you guys that are watching the videos are not subscribed to the channel, which I get it. I be watching videos too and forget to subscribe, but we're trying to hit 5K by the end of the year, so hit that sub button. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to do it right now. I'm just gonna put a picture up of Josh Giddey for 5 seconds. So if you sit here and look at Josh Giddey instead of subscribing for 5 seconds, you're weird. Which would bring us to the 2019-2020 season, where Kawhi and the Raptors would start off the season hot, going 17-3 in their first 20 games. Kawhi would be playing at an MVP level to start the season as well. He would break his personal single points in a game record of 45 on November 13th against the Wizards by putting up 52 points in a blowout win. And just 2 weeks later, he would break it again by going for 53 points against the Cavs in another blowout win. And everything was looking great for the Raptors as they were the 1 seed in the East with only about 1.5 months to playoffs. But then came March 11, 2020, where the NBA would shut down for nearly 4 months, all thanks to Rudy Gobert, which brought the NBA to Orlando, Florida in the NBA bubble. And it was tough for everyone to get back into it as everyone was a little rusty, especially the Raptors, who lost 7 of their first 8 bubble games to finish the season, which dropped them to the 4 seed behind the 3 seeded Nets. And even though Kawhi had a good season, he did not win the MVP, as Giannis had a monster season, taking home the MVP with an impressive stat line of 33.2 points per game and 14.7 rebounds. And that's who the Raptors matched up with in the first round, and it was going to be a super tough series trying to stop the league MVP. And a tough series is exactly what it was, as the series went 7 games, but in game 7, Kawhi's clutch gene came out in full force. He went out and dropped 48 points, and the Raptors won the game by 20, moving on to the next round, which moved the Raps on to play the 1-seeded Nets. And unlike real life, this Nets team was actually working out. But the Raptors defense was absolutely elite this series, keeping the Nets with 2 of the best scorers in the league under 105 points in 4 of the 6 games this series. Kawhi did a great job guarding KD and limited him to 20 points or under in 3 games of the series. And it was a duo of Kawhi and Pascal combining for 65 of the team's points to advance the Raps onto the Eastern Conference Finals. In the Eastern Conference Finals, it would be a defensive battle between the Heat and Raptors, as we all know how bubble Jimmy Butler gets. He was hooping, but so was Kawhi, as they were trading buckets all series long. And this series would all come down to the Heat down 1 with the ball in the final seconds of the game. Jimmy Butler, 6 seconds left, pulling up. It's gonna hit off the rim. The Raptors with the ball, and they foul late. That's gonna be the game. The Raptors are moving on, knocking the Heat out in 7 games. The finals would be the toughest matchup for the Raps playoff run yet. They'd be trying to recreate NBA history and beat Lil Mickey and Anthony Disney. And the Raps would be off to a good start, taking game 1 with Norman Powell having a surprising 31-point game to help get the dub. Game 2 though, LeBron would come back with an answer with a 41-point triple-double to take game 2. Game 3 would be all Lakers as well, with LeBron once again going for over 40 points. But Kawhi was able to finally get it going in game 4, and that helped the Raptors take game 4 and 5 as he was starting to catch fire. And game 6 would be all Raptors as well, with Kawhi dropping 36 to help secure the ring. The not so great surrounding team around Lil Mickey and Anthony Disney was the downfall of the Lakers, as the Raptors were an all-around very good team, and that's why they were able to take home the ring. The Raptors have now won the past 2 years, and we're getting ready to try and three-peat this year. And they would look very good during the regular season, and Kawhi also looked very good, averaging a 26.3, 9.6 rebound per game season. But that wasn't good enough for the MVP, as it would go to Kevin Durant out in Brooklyn with a 32-point per game average this season. Toronto's first round matchup was tough against the 6-seeded Bucks once again. Well, it looked like it was going to be tough at least, but Kawhi and the Raps would dominate the Bucks, only taking 5 games to win the series, which brought us to the second round against the league MVP Kevin Durant. And the Nets would pick up one of the best scorers in the NBA, James Harden, since the Raptors last saw them. But this time, the Raptors defense was not able to contain KD and the Nets, as they scored over 125 points in 4 of the 6 games. And that would lead to Kawhi and the Raps getting sent home early in the second round. The Raptors would draft rookie Scotty Barnes in this year's draft, who seemed to fit right into the Raptors scheme. It looked like he was going to be a huge help to Kawhi and the Raptors. Another player who really stepped up this season was OG Anunoby. He broke over 20 points per game this year, solidifying himself as one of the top scorers on the team. And Kawhi also had a good season, but the MVP would go to Luka this year, who had a crazy season, averaging a 34-point triple-double. And these young players starting to step up would be a huge help for the Raptors heading into the playoffs, as the Raptors were the be 3 seed playing the 6 seeded Nets who knocked them out last year. And this series was really just going to come down to if Kawhi could limit KD, to be honest. And game 1, it did not look like Kawhi was going to be able to, as KD would go for 47 points in Toronto, stealing game 1. Game 2 would go different though, as Kawhi would go for a 34-point double-double, tying the series up 1-1, and they were headed back to Brooklyn. And home court didn't seem to affect the Raps in game 3, as they would win by 25 points, with Scottie Barnes putting up a impressive 14-point double-double. The Raptors would take game 4 and a 3-1 series lead, which led us to next game as the series seemed to be over. But KD wasn't going down that easy. He would score over 40 in the next 2 games to tie the series up 3-3 to push a game 7. And it was looking like Kawhi was not going to blow a 3-1 lead early. He would have a 27-point first half, and KD would be held under 10 points. But KD and the Nets would lock in and have a better second half, and ended up making the game a close one going into the 4th quarter. In the 4th, KD and Kawhi would be trading buckets all quarter as nobody wanted to go home. But with the Raptors up 5 with a minute left, Kawhi would hit the dagger 3-pointer, advancing the Raptors onto the next round. In the 2nd round, the Raptors matched up against a young Cavaliers team, and many wouldn't even thought the Cavs would be this far in the playoffs in the 2nd round, but Darius Garland was on a mission as he averaged over 30 points per game in round 1 versus the Heat. But the Raps were an overall just better team and more experienced team, and that led to a 2nd round sweep. The Eastern Conference Finals was the Celtics versus the Raptors, and these were 2 of the best teams in the league, so you knew it was going to be a good series. And the Raptors started off this series really strong, taking both games at home, taking a 2-0 series lead. But as the series would go back to Boston, the Celtics would respond right back in the next 2 games, taking their next 2 games at home. And the winning at home theme would continue as the Raps took game 5 in Toronto and the Celtics took game 6 in Boston, which brought us to game 7 in Toronto, and the theme would continue. The Raptors would win again, as a home team would not lose a game in this series, which would advance the Raptors to the finals to play the 2-seeded Grizzlies, who just upset the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. The finals would surprisingly be a really good series, as the Raptors were having a really tough time stopping Ja Morant. But even with Ja's great series, the Raps were still up in the series 3-2 going into game 6. And with the help of a 37-point double-double from Kawhi Leonard, the Raps and Kawhi were able to get ring number 3. The Raptors were in the middle of building a dynasty with ring number 3 in just 4 seasons. And this team was only improving with young players like OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes, and Gary Trent Jr. Kawhi had another great season as he was showing no signs of slowing down, averaging a 28.3 point per game double-double, which would help the Raptors to a 61-21 record as the 1 seed in the East. The MVP this season would be going to Luka again, who just averaged another 30-point per game triple-double. And with the Raptors getting the 1 seed in the East, they would get by the first 2 rounds pretty easily, which would bring them to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would meet Boston once again. And after the Celtics were knocked out by the Raptors last year, you know they wanted this series even more. But it wasn't going to be easy if the duo of Siakam and Kawhi played like they did in game 1, combining for over 71 points. Game 2 went the Raptors' way as well, as they shut the Celtics down with lockdown defense. Game 3 would be back in Boston, and Tatum would come out on fire, dropping 22 points in the first half, and he continued his scoring into the second half, dropping 39 points, getting the win for Boston. But after game 3, Boston did not win another game the entire series, and that would lead the Raptors to advance to the finals once again. The Pelicans would come out on fire to start the finals, winning the first 2 games in Toronto, which would bring us back to New Orleans, where Kawhi and the Raps would be faced with the challenge of coming back from down 2-0 in the series. And Kawhi was able to answer with a huge game 3 to make the series 2-1. And in game 4, the Raps would fall to the Pels again, going down 3-1 in the series, heading back to Toronto. But the Raptors did not give up, as they were able to pull together and win the next 2 games to push for a game 7 in Toronto. And game 7 in Toronto wasn't even close, as the Raps would win by almost 30 points and get ring number 4, coming back from a 3-1 lead. And we could pick next season up right in the playoffs, where the Raptors would make it to the Eastern Conference Finals again, making it through the first 2 rounds easy, which would get the Eastern Conference Finals of the Celtics Raptors for the 3rd year in a row. And the main question was, could the Celtics finally make it past the Raptors and make the finals? And it looked like they were finally gonna, as Tatum was hooping all series, leading the C's to a 3-1 lead. And this time the Raptors were not able to come back from a 3-1 lead, as they would get bounced out in the playoffs in only 5 games, which brought us to the offseason, where the Raptors would take a pretty big loss, losing OG Anunoby to the Knicks. But I think they made up for the loss of OG pretty well, as they grabbed Tyrese Maxey over the offseason, which would be a huge addition, as this team was in need of a point guard, which brought us to the playoffs, where the 2-seeded Raps would match up against the 3-seeded Knicks in the 2nd round, and OG would be trying to get a win against his old team, and he would have the help of Jalen Brunson, who was scoring at an absolute elite rate this whole series. But the Raps would still come out on top in 6 games and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference Finals was the Cavs and the Raptors, featuring 2 of the best young guards in the NBA with Darius Garland and Tyrese Maxey. But what would separate these teams was Kawhi Leonard, as he played great throughout the whole series on both sides of the ball, leading the Raps to another finals appearance. In the finals, the Raptors would match up against the Thunder, and SGA would definitely be a problem to stop, but the rest of this Thunder team, and even him, was just a little too young and inexperienced to win a finals, as the Raptors would take home the finals in only 5 games, extending to this absolutely insane run that they're on. And while the Raps just won a ring and it all seemed good in Toronto, a super team was just formed in the East. LaMelo Ball would join the Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler, who was getting old, but he was still a bucket. And they also went and got Jalen Green, who was starting to become one of the better guards in the league. And they still had Tyler Hero, who's a pretty good scorer they got coming off the bench. And the Heat is exactly who the Raps would match up against in the Eastern Conference Finals, and this series was an absolute battle going back and forth. Tyrese Maxey would be the leading scorer throughout the series, averaging a little over 30 points per game this series. And LaMelo would be leading the Heat, averaging a triple-double throughout the entire series, which would bring us to Game 7, where it wouldn't be as close as you would think. And wow, the Raptors just got blown out in Game 7. That's disappointing.